So we're probably overdue for a quick update. I've been continuing to play with Prepared, essentially. Haven't done much, if anything, with X-Plane 11 recently. Really since getting my screen configuration sorted out. It's not completely sorted out yet, it's acceptable. I'm still continuing to work on that. It's a pain that there's no decent detailed documentation for the view group setup from Lockheed Martin. There is a page where you can read about it on their SDK documentation, but it's far too vague and incomplete. Not so much vague, just incomplete. I have made a little bit of headway. Well, I'm not sure if I have, but I'm trying to get my head around understanding this. I mean, if you've looked at some of the previous videos I've done on the view groups, you'll get a sense of how I set things up. So what's missing from that documentation, in my view? Well, a number of things. First of all, I've been able to set the thing up, and significantly you'll know that that's because I've tilted the monitors. There is a facility to set 3 parameters under a heading called offset PBH, pitch, bank and heading. Typically with a 3-screen array you set the heading to, well in this case 50 degrees to the right, 50 degrees to the left for each of the outlying screens. But in my case you also have to correct that tilt by setting the pitch, sorry not the pitch, the bank. And that works great, and you can sort of get the views to line up, but it's not at all clear what the implications of tilting the monitors are for the rest of the setup. And most jarringly, now this parameter called edge overlap, which is for blending if you're using overlapping projector images, or in the case of using LCD monitors it's to account for the bezel management. It's not at all clear how to set that parameter because the bezels don't work the same in this situation. You can see on this screen my bezels, if you like, they're triangular. So I've done that empirically, if you like, just by taking a ruler and picking a couple of points on the display. If you don't have bezel management, quite often you'll see the same item on each side of the bezel. I've measured the distance just literally on the screen between 2 images of the same item on either side of the bezel, and then I've done that again at different points up to the height of the bezel and compared them. So what I noticed was at the bottom of the image the distance between the two images was about 7 centimeters, and then I don't know, a third of the way up I identified another couple and it was 8.5 centimeters. So there's a divergence, and I'm trying to understand how to make sense of that. What I did notice was if I change the projection algorithm, this is in the view group setup, from cylindrical, which is the default, to spherical, that discrepancy narrowed. It didn't completely eliminate it, but it narrowed. So that suggests to me that, well, I don't know what it suggests to me, but it suggests I should probably use spherical projection instead of cylindrical. Now the other thing that occurred to me was to measure the distance in height between the centres of the monitors, because the centre of them, if you think about this logically, the centre of the outlying monitors is lower. And actually I've measured that, it's about 24 centimetres lower, which is quite significant. And then I've tried putting that in the offset XYZ area of the view frustum setup, so a Y offset, in other words, of 24 centimetres or 0.24 metres. And I mean, I've yet to really conclude whether that's made any difference, but I think logically speaking that's the right thing to do. Now I think that has made a little bit of a difference. I've created a new view group similar to the old one, but I've done that that Y offset, and I've been playing with the bezel, well the edge overlap value. I've currently got that set to 10%, which represents about 8 centimetres. Don't forget that percentage is a percentage of the width of the screen. And at the moment things line up pretty well. I don't get quite the same jarring discrepancies when I'm pitched up or down as I did before. I still do get discrepancies, but you probably can't see on this image here because there's nothing really, there's no continuous features go across that you can see, but by and large it's reasonably well behaved. But it would be nice, getting back to the point, it would be nice to be able to read about this in great detail from Lockheed and set it up methodically. So that's one thing I've been playing with. That was meant to be a quick reference to that. The other thing is I've been trying to find, you know, all along really, different ways to film this cockpit or photograph it, particularly when I'm flying it, and it's kind of difficult. I'm in a cramped space here, I can't really get very far back in that direction. So what I've done just briefly is I've set up a camera position that allows you to watch the aircraft and see more of the cockpit while it's flying on autopilot. I'll just show you a brief example of that in a moment. And what you'll be seeing as we fly through that is this is me still sticking in the vicinity of Bonner's Ferry 65S, which is a nice scenic airport. The weather's kind of hazy today, but it's clear otherwise in terms of cloud cover. And this is really nicely modelled with a lot of area with a lot of photoreal terrain. It's an interesting airport in its own right. It's got quite a lot of relief in terms of the terrain immediately surrounding the airport. It's kind of a little bit hard on the performance, so you will notice when you're going through some of the turns here we're getting a little bit of stuttering or juddering, whatever you want to call that. But by and large this is a really nice airport. I'll do some more flying in this area, and we're just going to make a few passes overhead the airport. It's flying a bit of a left-hand spiral really. I was going to set this up on an ILS approach at some other airport and then have the aircraft fly down the ILS without me in the pilot seat. I haven't bothered to do that. Okay, something else to talk about. I have finally upgraded to Air Manager version 3. It doesn't look a lot different if you're familiar with my Twin Otter panel. So there's now a payware, or rather two payware panels for the Twin Otter from Sim Innovations for use with Air Manager. So there's the main instrument panel and then there's an auxiliary panel, and that has lots of things on that I don't have on the screens because I've got the hardware. So the overhead panel, the start panel, what else, the fuel control panel, various things. So you get all of those, and I've got, well, I didn't pay for that panel. Sim Innovations gave me a complimentary copy of that to test really, and I was kind of relieved it wasn't too, I didn't go through the trauma of trying to port across the Air Manager 2 gauges. By and large I didn't do that. A couple of them I have had to do that for reasons which I'll talk about in a second. I was relieved to see that you can import the paid for panel and then you can mix and match. You can take gauges out, you can move them around. So I've kind of restored my original panel more or less. I've got the compass in the middle here. We're missing the chronometer. The new gauge, sorry, the new panels seem to have omitted the chronometer. When I tried to reintroduce the prototype chronometer from my Air Manager 2 panel, the numbers didn't, the LCD digits didn't look right. They're tiny, so I'd have to do something to make that work. And honestly, the chronometer, I mean, it looks nice, but I don't use it, and it's not that much use. So I've got a gap here. I'll put something else in there in due course. Now I did worry that the ADI wasn't going to work at all, because you may remember far back when I stopped using the virtual cockpit in the Twin Otter, the ADI in the prototype panel stopped working, as did the flap indicator. And that turned out to be because those were coded using data supplied by LVARs in the Twin Otter model that only get updated when the virtual cockpit is on display. So I did worry that that would carry over to the Air Manager version 3 payware panels, but actually that wasn't a problem. Those gauges worked, but I did find that the ADI doesn't actually work properly. The steering bars for the flight directory in particular, it looks like they've been recoded for Air Manager 3 for that gauge, but the steering bars for the flight director don't work properly at all. I don't know what they do, but they don't do the right thing. So I've gone back to my original prototype gauge. I've reinstated that on the panel, and thankfully I had way back actually recoded that myself so that the problem that I described earlier was fixed. I mean, it was a very simple problem. It was just getting the pitch and bank data, as I say, from a twin otter extended LVAR, but that data is actually available from the standard FSX or P3D variables, and you just have to change very slightly the arithmetic to scale those values to the gauge, and that works fine. So that was the main issue I had to fix. A couple of other things that made me go back to, I think some of these gauges are the ones from the prototype rather than the ones from the payware panel, and by and large the reason for that is these gauges are on, some of these gauges come on quite a large background, if you like. So if you look at the HSI, for example, this is not one of the gauges I replaced, I don't think it is. You know, that gauge comes on a square background, dark grey background that extends outside of the bezel that you see on the panel here, and that meant that the gauges, when you stack them on the panel, had to be further apart than sometimes was strictly necessary. And because I've got quite a small monitor, this is not a 1080p monitor, this is a smaller resolution, you know, my real estate is quite valuable. So what I did was, in the original panel, was I cropped some of those gauges just by loading up the graphic and you know, cropping that. But you can't do that with the payware gauges. The payware gauges, although you can mix and match them, you can't edit them. You can't edit the code, and you can't edit the graphics. In fact, you can't even find them. They're stored in some encrypted form. So for that reason, a couple of, I think the outside air temperature gauge, probably the turn and slip indicator, and maybe a couple more, they're actually from the old panel as well, but they work. And the only other thing that I've done is my fire control panel. It's the one I created. It's a very cut down one that I created for the original. So that's Air Manager version 3. What else? I've got the RXP. I don't know if I've talked about this before or not, but I've bought the new Reality XP GNS 530 version 2 for prepared and FSX, largely because the version 1 isn't compatible with prepared, and there are some improvements with the version 2. What can I tell you about that? I mean, I haven't done a lot with it, but notably from memory, you can display it without the bezel, which you used to have to hack before, unless you had the professional version, which was much more expensive. So that's possible now, right out of the box. What else? You can load and save flight plans. I can't remember I don't think you could do this in version 1. You have to do it in a roundabout way. You know, you load and save them to a virtual memory card or something. I guess in the real GNS 530 and 430 you can stick a memory card in. But as far as I can tell, what that allows you to do is set up a flight plan or create a flight plan on something called like SkyVector, and then save it in the FPL format, and then you should be able to load it into the RXP. You just put it in a particular folder on the computer and it can pick it up. Setting up the GPS to work off my panel, there's now 2 ways to do that. Previously you could only control the version 1 of the GNS 530 using keyboard commands, and then you had to get Linda or FSU IPC or whatever you're using to send keystrokes to control that, and that did work. By and large it worked fine. You did have to very tediously make sure that you had unique keystrokes that weren't in use for anything else. The new version does support that method as well, but there's an additional, well, it is additional, it's an alternative, or you can mix and match methods. You can set a parameter in the setup that intercepts the standard FSX GPS commands. Now they don't all map one-to-one sensibly onto the GNS 530 commands, because they're not, the GNS 530 has extra functions over and above the standard GPS, but there is a correspondence, and the mappings are listed in the manual, and so you can use that method and save yourself keystrokes. Another improvement that I've noticed is you can be navigating on autopilot on the GNS 530, but there is an option in the setup to, I think it's called something like follow FSX GPS waypoints or something like that. What that does is, and I was doing that today to do the example flight today, because I set up a flight plan in FSX, and although it's not displayed on the GNS 530, the GNS 530 is actually following the FSX flight plan. Well, again, that may not make sense to you, but it's different from it hasn't actually got a flight plan set up in the GNS 530, but it will make the turns and follow what the P3D GPS is doing. So that's all I can think of for now. See you next time.